Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Ivey, the host of the HR Investigations podcast, and I look forward to having you join me for today's episode, HR Insights, The Data Speaks. I'm going to delve into some data from a recent benchmark study on the current trends in managing employee issues in the workplace. You won't want to miss this one.
Welcome to the HR Investigations podcast, exploring the issues, challenges, strategies, and solutions. Sponsored by RPCHR and hosted by Natalie Ivey, an HR consultant, licensed PI, and author of the best-selling book, How to Conduct Internal Investigations, a practical guide for human resource professionals. And now, here's Natalie.
Hi, everybody. This is Natalie Ivey, and I am so glad to have you with me today. In a recent episode, I discussed the importance of self-care, especially those of you who are in the role of HR and managing employee relations issues. It can be a tough job some days, can't it? So if you haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to do so. Now, in today's show, I'm going to talk about some data collected in the 8th annual benchmark study provided by HR Acuity. And by the way, in a future episode, I'm actually going to have Deb Muller, the CEO of HR Acuity, on my show, and you'll definitely want to make sure you don't miss that. So on my first list of things to talk about today is a rather alarming trend regarding the types of employee relations issues. On the benchmark study, policy violations, behavioral issues, discrimination, harassment, or retaliation allegations, and EEOC charges actually reached their highest level since 2018, and performance issues also saw an increase from 2022. So what's going on with this? Well, from my vantage point, I've seen this increase firsthand with some of our clients. What's happening is a shift to more accountability. Organizations have been grappling with the inflationary environment, the cost of goods sold increasing in some cases by more than 50%, yet they may struggle in passing increased costs on to their customers, so profit margins are shrinking, a big-time squeeze. So business leaders are really looking for ways to make improvements in their businesses, and with that comes a greater push for accountability. And with that greater push for accountability comes some performance management discussions. Some employees just don't want to be held accountable, do they? And then some of those will then lodge complaints with HR or employee relations against their supervisors in an effort to get their managers to back off. Now, on the benchmark study, policy violations, behavioral issues, and discrimination, harassment, and so on, those are definitely some things that we're seeing. But as I said, also performance issues are definitely on the uptick. In some cases, there's a little bit of kind of an opposite thing that's kind of going on. Instead of employees just being frustrated by being held accountable and having performance discussions with their supervisors, and they get annoyed and then they go lodge complaints. The other part of this is employees who really are frustrated, perhaps with increased workloads. Maybe they're really upset and start showing a real negative attitude at work. They become more difficult to work with. They're beginning to kind of shut down, and their collaboration with other team members is not really very stellar. And they become very jaded, negative. And then what happens? Other team members may go to HR to complain about a peer. Maybe that peer who's feeling a little stressed is snapping at others and maybe engaging in some behavior that is not respectful or in line with an organization's values. All right, regardless of which way we look at it, on the one side of this issue, sure, there are some employees that are really unhappy about being held accountable, and then they may come forward with even bad faith allegations that their supervisors are treating them unfairly and that there is a violation of policy such as discrimination. But then we also have it going the other way too. We do have some issues with some bad managers. I've talked about it on a number of different occasions on this podcast. When we get tasked with doing investigative work, it's usually a reactionary process to something that's kind of broken in the business, right? So this data doesn't really surprise me. We're putting managers into positions where they're not equipped to really do the job very effectively. And they make mistakes. They are also maybe very stressed because of increasing workloads, and they're kind of stretched to capacity. They're struggling with maybe employee turnover and that sort of thing. And it doesn't surprise me that we're seeing an uptick here. All right, well, what do we do about it? The first thing I want to point out is it starts with gathering the data. If you aren't currently collecting HR and employee relations departmental data, And especially if you're a larger organization and you have a dedicated ER department, then you're really kind of operating in sort of a 1990s kind of a mindset. We've really got to have the data and analytics. Why? Because this is what's going to help us to really evaluate the employee complaints, where they're coming from, the severity. It also makes it very difficult to engage your senior leadership to try to affect any sort of a change, any meaningful change, to really slow down the volume of cases. Because if you don't really have the hard data to back it up, it's just sort of anecdotal. And it may come across that HR is just really having their feathers sort of ruffled. And senior leadership may not necessarily take what you're saying seriously. It's the data that really backs up the argument that you're trying to make, that maybe you are under-resourced. There are certain places that managers really have not been equipped with the right skills and you'd like to upskill them, but you're getting pushback because you can't get budget to support it, that kind of stuff. If you don't really have the hard data, you're going to get the pushback from the higher-ups. Now, in addition to capturing the data on the issue specifics, like specific managers, departments, or divisions of the organization that are really presenting the most issues or perhaps a pattern of the most serious issues, you also have to then delve into the percentage of the issues that are substantiated versus those that are not. If you're seeing a greater percentage of your complaints, especially things around EEO issues like discrimination, harassment, as not being substantiated, well, that's an indicator of something going on in your culture. Why is it that there is such a frequency of these complaints? You may have supervisors who are trying to hold others accountable, but you have some employees on the payroll who just don't want to be. And this type of data may give you insight into how to start shifting your culture to one where there is a little bit more accountability, where employees will start taking some more ownership of their performance versus every darn time they have a performance one-on-one with their boss, they're going to run to HR and fashion it into a harassment complaint. And we want to try to turn this around. Trend number 2. So continuing the 2023 trend regarding mental health. Well, mental health issues continued to be the primary factor behind case volumes. 70% of organizations attributed increases to mental health related challenges. All right, so what's going on here? Well, a good portion of this 70% may very well be employees who are being stretched well beyond capacity for what one FTE can possibly do in each work week. I get that, and this is what I talked about in my one episode on HR Recharge. Some positions today have people working to the point of being utterly ridiculous, and with the stress they're being placed under just to keep up, of course, it's going to start to cause them to fray at the seams a little bit. Now, on the other hand, here is what I've seen. I've also seen, and I surmise, that some of this 70% increase in org citing mental health issues as sources of employee relations issues is going back to the accountability comment I made earlier. Some employees just don't like to be held accountable, period. And when supervisors are putting pressure on them or micromanaging, as they often say, if you kind of use your decoder ring for some of this, it translates into, hey, boss, you better back off. We all know it's a manager's responsibility to accomplish business results through a team of people, not unlike a coach who's responsible for the players on a football field, accomplishing a series of plays in order to win the game and the championship. The reality, though, is that a lot of employees have learned how to sort of play the HR and employee relations game. They know if they just run to HR or employee relations and make a complaint, then at least temporarily, they can usually get their supervisor to kind of back off a bit. Unfortunately, this has led to some problems in some organizations with employees somewhat weaponizing the internal complaint reporting process. They specifically target particular supervisors with whom they want to get even for having performance discussions. Now, what do we do about this increase in mental health issues that are turning into ER complaints? Well, the first thing, it goes back to what I said about capturing the data. Let's capture data around what the mental health issues actually are, as just really painting this with a broad brush, mental health issues. That's just way, way too big. We need to really better understand the specifics, and in the benchmark study, I'll share it with you. One way to effectively manage the increased case volume is to proactively address issues through aftercare to ensure issues are actually resolved. So a critical role in employee well-being, aftercare provides closure and helps employees to move past issues. Only 6%, though, of organizations had a well-defined process to proactively support involved parties and then monitor situations after an investigation has concluded. Adopting proactive aftercare may also curb future increases in mental health issues. All right, so that's right out of the 8th annual benchmark study. All right, a lot of times, once an investigation closes, HR or ER, or in some cases even ethics, says, okay, wow, awesome, that one is over. Whew. All right, time for a glass of Cabernet. All right, okay, great, but now what? All right, you may still have a manager that's got a bit of an attitude from having had a complaint lodged against her, and an angry employee who feels he didn't get the outcome from going to HR that he really thought he would. So then these two people have to continue to work together. Road ahead may be a very bumpy ride. One of the things that I'm currently working on at RPC Human Resources is an online portal called the RPC Academy, where you'll be able to subscribe to different levels of content through a membership model. And one of the courses that I'm building is about investigations aftercare and some strategies for what I call the way forward. So in the coming months, I'm going to be sharing more of that with you, because I do think that this is just a critical thing that we need to be addressing in HR and employee relations. All right, now, trend number 3. Organizations are starting to respond to continually growing case volumes by examining data to identify patterns and predict future issues. And in the study, more than half of organizations, 51%, identified early warning flags and used targeted interventions to minimize further issues, and 60% implemented initiatives to address trends or spikes. All right, this is a really good thing, because I've been talking about this for probably the last 15 years. We have got to understand the health of the organization by what the data shows us. This is not unlike looking at the data for exit interviews or viewing the analytics to see how much involuntary turnover we had in a particular department and under a particular manager. It's also a bit like a doctor who's trying to diagnose the root cause to a medical condition without running some diagnostic tests like blood work or doing a urine sample and analyzing that. And how is the doctor possibly going to know what's going on with you if they don't do any of those diagnostics? They'd be guessing. And unfortunately, that sometimes is what happens in HR today. We're kind of guessing, and we're just anecdotally assessing situations, and we think that this is what's going on. We have to get much better at capturing the data and then really examining it with a critical eye. What are the patterns? Why so many behavioral issues happening, let's say, at our call center, specifically in our collections department? All right, I'm being a little silly there. I know you get a lot of complaints from collections. Those of you who work in financial services, that's always a hot spot for employee complaints. All right, but you get my meaning here. If you find that there are certain parts of your business that you're seeing the patterns and trends, why? Why has there been a sharp increase in code of conduct violations from our technicians at, let's say, our Oklahoma City shop? Why? When we're not really seeing that show up anywhere else. What's the common denominator? All right, with this type of data, it really allows you to just better diagnose the health of the business. And one of the things that you know that I'm noted for saying in the HR community is the best investigation is the one you don't have to do, right? So this is kind of my meaning. A lot of these things are showing up, and we're seeing it now even in this benchmark study, which was a lot of organizations that contributed to that study, by the way, that HR Acuity did. What is important, though, is that absolute understanding by looking at the data to say we have a problem, so that then it becomes that platform for some meaningful change. Now, if you need some help with how to implement some strategies to collect data, develop reporting with this type of data, then you certainly know where to find me. You can also reach out to my assistant. Her name is Madison Eben. And also, by the way, I have another podcast episode that's coming up where you're going to have an opportunity to hear from Madison. And but her email is madison.eben, E-B-B-E-N, @rpchr.com. So if you need some help working on this, this is the type of stuff we do. We work a lot with organizations on implementing investigation procedures and helping you just to get better data and analytics. So we're happy to help you. With that said, let's recap what we talked about today. All right, so the first trend is definitely we're seeing an uptick in policy violations, performance issues, behavioral issues, harassment, discrimination. We're definitely seeing it, and highest level since 2018. We've got to work on it. And we've got to start drilling down on what's going on in our businesses, and that's gathering some data. All right. The other thing is the mental health issues. Again, it goes back to the data. It's too broad. We've got to really drill it down. What does this really mean when employees are saying, well, my mental health is being affected? By whom? By what? What are the factors? What are the key things that are causing you to report it in that fashion? And then also, in number 3, more organizations are really spending the time on identifying the patterns and identifying future trends. So for those of you who are in smaller to medium-sized organizations where typically I do not see this type of healthy reporting, take it from the big guys. They definitely have something going on there, meaning larger organizations that have thousands of employees. They're really recognizing the importance of having good employee relations data so that we can make some meaningful change in our businesses. So that's it for me today. I hope this has been a good shot in the arm to help you understand a little bit about what's going on and share with you some tips and some things to consider. So I look forward to seeing you back at another one of the HR Investigations podcast. Have a great day. See ya.
Thanks for joining us today on the HR Investigations podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, and share the show with any colleagues who will benefit from our strategies and solutions. For free bonus resources, simply visit hr-investigations.com. And remember, if you'd like some help with improving your investigative skills, or if your organization is in need of an external investigator to help with the case, please get in touch with us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.